Hello, welcome to our time together in a conversation called The Story Matters. Because we believe that the story matters, every story matters, your story matters, our story matters. And story becomes part of the way in which we really connect with our life and connect with each other. So we are very pleased to have Helena Van Voorst, who is Executive Director for United Way, and she is our guest today. I want to start by thanking you on behalf of this organization where we're sitting right now, and namely Middlebury Community Television, for helping us with our annual meeting. And we've had great comments on how that was a lively place and with good ideas and ways that we can connect. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome. I had a lot of fun that night, so thanks for inviting me.
Good. And so we want to turn to you and let you tell us about where you live, where you work, what you do, and the stories that you hear, because you work with a large number of people, a large number of organizations. So tell us about that, so
Absolutely.
we get a sense of how you spend your life.
Sure. Well, as you said, my name's Helena, and I live with my husband Matthew and our two children, Isabel, who will be 12 soon, and my son Hendrik, who is 8, and we live in Virgins. We've been there since 2005, but I grew up in neighboring Ferrisburg, so I joke that when I got married, I moved to the big city of Virgins, just a little to the south. And my husband is a South Dakotan, so he's a transplant to the area, and I often say he's more Vermonter than I am because he loves to fish in the stream and drive the mountain roads, and he's become quite the organic gardener, and so he's acclimated very well to Vermont life.
This is a great place to be.
It
able
is
to
a
do
great
that.
place to be.
And and children are enjoying this time, snowshoes, and
They
all that.
love it, yes, and now that summer is upon us, or almost upon us, they're busy biking and jumping on the trampoline, and so we live in a great place.
Yeah. You have an organization that has a great title, United Way. I mean, it has so much promise to this. So tell us about United Way.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you've pointed out, core to our mission is uniting people, bringing people together and mobilizing the compassion and the generosity of people and organizations in the county for the good of everyone in the county. And when the pandemic struck, there was that brief moment where we wondered how we could do that in a virtual way. And it's been really remarkable to see collaboration and people working together actually increase and improve despite any physical distancing that was happening. So,
Can you offer some examples of what's happened?
yeah, absolutely. I think something folks will be hearing a lot about in the days and weeks to come is our current housing crisis. So we had an unprecedented number of people experiencing homelessness here in Addison County during the past 14 months. And the organizations that serve that population have worked together in incredible ways to make sure that people are safely sheltered, fed, that they're receiving the support services that they need, and with no concern really about, whose job is what or what the, organization boundaries might be, just getting together 2 or 3 times a week to make sure that everyone who needs help is receiving it. And in the next couple of weeks, as hotels and motels begin to return to their normal business, we're going to have fewer and fewer places to shelter people. Our shelters are full, they're at capacity. Our affordable housing units, there's 300 owned by Addison County Community Trust.
Right.
And there's a wait list of 182 households. So we have a serious housing crisis on our hands, but we also have an incredible network of organizations and passionate people who are working together to try to figure that out together.
Can you say something about network? Networking is a very important word, but sometimes not necessarily understood. What does that mean? So what does it mean really to have an issue like this, and where do you gather all these people? And does some come by surprise to you?
So there's some long-standing wonderful things that have been in place in this county that had us in a position of strength right now. So the Addison County Housing Coalition, or the Continuum of Care, has been active and convening for many years. During the pandemic, I was asked to take over the role of chair while the past chair, Jean Montrose of Hope, was very busy helping everyone that her organization serves, and all those, John Graham Shelter and Charter House and CSAC and Women's Safe and Champlain Valley Office for Economic Opportunity. All of them were stretched thin, and so it was a perfect way for United Way to step in, take over the facilitation role, organize the Zoom meetings, and continuing bringing people together. But because Addison County has a good, strong history of working together and relying on one another, we were in a really good position to meet this new challenge. So our local network involves the organizations that literally build the housing, like Addison County Community Trust, to the organization that provides mental health services, to the organizations that serve people experiencing domestic violence or fleeing domestic violence. And so there's just this beautiful network that's really active and engaged with one another. And it makes us pretty special, I would say.
Good. And does this involve a lot more meetings?
It does. It does. I think I see the same people at different Zoom meetings 3 times a week most of the time. We usually have to orient.
Partner.
Yeah, we have to orient ourselves. Which meeting are we in right now?
Right, right. Have you, how would you assess Zoom as an important part of this whole pandemic experience?
Yeah, it comes with its pros and its cons. In some situations, I love the efficiency of Zoom. It feels like there's not a lot of wasted time because people almost feel like they're on air, like we are right now. And so they want to be clear with their words and to the point. And so in some ways, you can get a lot of work done relatively quickly via Zoom. But you miss that spontaneous interaction and connection with one another, and the creativity that comes from the energy within a room. I was just talking with Kelly Hickey about this today, about how we long for being in a room again together, so that we can just have that energy that you can't quite feel through Zoom. But Zoom got us through when we needed it most.
Right.
So
I started on Zoom on a small old iPad that my son gave me. And I didn't know anything about gallery. And if you had gallery, it was just about 7 people, maybe. And so I was watching this one at a time, and I'd say to myself, where did that person come from? I don't see, is that person in the room?
are they there?
And then all of a sudden, bing, bing, bing. And so gallery helped sort that out, but it never replaced presence,
Right.
I think.
Right.
It never replaced this, where you could see body language,
Yeah, we miss that. I think everyone's beginning to look forward to seeing each other again in person.
Yeah.
And United Way has a beautiful new conference room now, so we would actually love to host some of those meetings.
Can do that.
Yeah, down the road.
Yeah, that's good. So, United Way, had you ever thought that you would be involved with United Way earlier in your life? When did it come into your life?
I've always known about United Way. I've worked in the nonprofit sector my entire career. So like a lot of people who find themselves writing grants, it accidentally happened. My first job out of college was at a small hospital about the size of Porter in northwest Iowa. And that was the first place that I started to get involved in fundraising and development. And then my career path ended up following that trajectory forever. And so I've worked for a museum. I was at the Maritime Museum for many years, worked for a small private school, I've worked for a community coalition. And it was really the combination of the community coalition work where we were trying to mobilize entire communities for the health and safety of youth. And my comfort and love for connecting donors with something they can feel passionate about supporting, that made me feel like United Way would be a great place to be. I also love working with volunteers, especially board level volunteers, people who are willing to commit so much of their time and energy to an organization. I just feel like board members are, rock star volunteers. And so I've been able to work with them through most of my career, and it's something I really enjoy doing in my role at United Way, not just with my United Way board, which is amazing, but also supporting other organizations like Middlebury Community Television when they're holding special board meetings.
You've had a lot of contact with some of the best efforts in the community, right? Would that be a fair way to put it? That people, for one reason or other, are concerned about this cause or this need, and they're willing to invest themselves in that.
Yeah.
And then you get connected with them, and you help them get connected with others.
Yeah.
We've been here 22 years, my wife and I, and I remember a figure that sticks with me. Not many figures stick with me, but a figure that sticks with me about the number of not-for-profit organizations in Addison County. Now, it seems to me it was 63.
It's in hundreds.
In the
Yeah, it's a staggering number. We pulled together a list before the pandemic. It's a staggering number. It included churches, PTA groups, smaller groups like that. But there is a staggering number of nonprofits here in Addison County.
Yeah. And which is the other thing as I've been involved with the counseling service and with MCTV and other organizations, is how much Addison County seems to appreciate being involved with collaboration. And I've heard people in larger organizational meetings, when they talked about Addison County, say that it's one of the best places for collaboration. Can you illuminate that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's true. It maybe is in part because we're relatively small and we're relatively geographically close to each other, maybe than some of our friends in other parts of the state. And seems to be a high level of trust in one another that is special and helps the work to get done in a better way. And I think there's a shared desire to put the needs of the people we're serving ahead of any kind of ego or anything else that might get in the way of collaboration, which I think is really awesome. I'm very humbled to be a part of it.
Are there some things that do, without getting specifics, but are there some things that do get in the way of collaboration? In my experience, or what I've seen, most of the time, if collaboration isn't happening, it's unintentional. It's because sometimes the left hand and the right hand don't know what's happening. Okay.
And that's actually, you didn't even know about this, so this is an unintentional segue, but something that we're working on at United Way right now, and we're just in the early phases, is something we're calling Reimagine Addison County. And it's with that idea of making sure we all know what's going on in mind. It's sort of, there are different groups like the housing group, but there's also early childhood, there's also the economic development group. There's many different parts of the community right now that are thinking about what they've learned on the other end of this pandemic, where they're going, what the needs are, what the assets and strengths are that they have right now, and they're developing plans for the future and reimagining themselves. And Reimagine Addison County is an effort to kind of get folks on the same page so that any siloing that might happen unintentionally will be broken down, and people can find new or different ways to connect kind of cross-sector. So it'll be much bigger than United Way's mission. This plan will live in the county, not necessarily at United Way of Addison County, but we will sponsor and convene that effort in the next couple of months.
Well, that's an important piece, isn't it? To be able to see we're part of something bigger.
Exactly.
That it's bigger than this, it's bigger than that.
Right.
But it's bigger. But it gets bigger when all of these come together and do some things. Then it really comes alive.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Is there anything coming up that you're thinking about that you want to share at this point?
Well, we're really
The
go
Addison, that's big.
Yeah, that's going to be a big piece of work, and we are working with a consultant to help us facilitate those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be a lot of work, but we're looking forward to sharing that and letting that guide our work. So a piece of that will inform how United Way of Addison County can respond to the community's needs. So before the pandemic, shortly after I started at United Way, we did some strategic planning, and we made some commitments to Addison County.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about them a lot in our materials. We said we promise to be ever evolving and forward thinking. We promise to lead in collaboration, and we promise to raise awareness and support for issues.
Mm-hmm.
And then the pandemic happened, and our strategic, our action plan kind of went in the garbage can.
Right.
But those commitments to Addison County became very relevant and helped us figure out how to respond.
And
so
people found ways to stay connected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this commitment to stay ever evolving and forward thinking, reimagine Addison County. When we look at that blueprint, then the United Way of Addison County Board will look at that, and the staff will look at that, and we'll say, so what can we do to support this effort, and how might we need to evolve and change what we do? So I don't know what that will mean or what that will look like quite yet, but I'm excited.
I share that excitement with you. I said part of our emphasis here is on storytelling, and when we were going into the time when the downtown was going to be closed and the tunnels were going to go in, and that summer, early on, a small group that we work with on storytelling, we said, what should we do? And it was really clear, let's gather the people who tell stories. And so we gathered a group around the theme of back in the day. And we had 2 events here in town, and they're storytelling events, people telling all the stories that they remembered from their childhood here in town. And I think it helped people get focused, maybe in some sense not to get anxious. And it helped, and we've had some individuals, telling those stories again and finding new ones. And so are there stories that have emerged that you particularly have caught hold of that you think might be interesting to share?
I'm thinking about, keeping it focused on United Way. And one organizational story is that I think it was February of 2020. So the pandemic was getting started, but hadn't been named a pandemic quite yet. Mm-hmm. We were in a house on 48 Court Street was our office, and the board had made the decision to sell that property and to move into a bigger space. We were sharing offices. Our conference room was now filled with staff and offices, and we felt like we were, before we knew what social distancing was, we felt like we couldn't socially distance in that space at that time. And I believe it was March or so that we signed a lease for a new property. And it feels like a significant part of our organizational history, this move from just from one physical space to another, and the sale of a property that was our building. And that it happened during this crazy time where suddenly people were wondering if they would ever need office space again, or if our kitchens were our
Right.
new office spaces. And it felt like both the worst time and the best time, because we could never, well, with the pandemic happening, we wouldn't be safe in our old office space together, and in our new office space we could distance better, and yet there was this pandemic happening. And it just stands out as kind of an ironic thing that on the calendar before the pandemic I had put all hands on deck for moving day. And I eventually changed it to say 2 hands at a time, only your own, come alone, be masked, here's the sanitizer.
That's a great story.
We ended up moving in phases, and everyone came on their own time and a scheduled time to just close up their office, and then eventually we had some distance moving. But this big organizational change in the middle of a pandemic, I think a lot of people missed that we even moved, because it was just sort of bizarre timing.
It'll be a memory and a story that'll get told.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
to
part of our story.
To their
for sure.
grandchildren.
Yeah.
Everything's for the grandchildren,
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. In terms of, I had another question, but I just went.
Oh, I'm relieved that I'm not the only one that happens
Yes.
to.
Okay. I think it's delightful that you are doing what you're doing, and are able to bring people together. That is such a critical thing, and do you have people expecting to? Do you have people expecting to get back to normal, or is there an acceptance of the fact that the new normal will be something different? And as you're planning ahead,
Yeah.
how do people, are they taking the pandemic lesson into the future?
Across every organization that United Way of Addison County works with, I see a desire to not return to normal, but to return to better than normal.
Mm-hmm.
And this pandemic shone a light on weak spots. It also highlighted where we're really strong and what was working and wasn't working for everyone in Addison County. So we've been saying we don't want to go back to normal. That wasn't good enough. So I think there's a commitment, at least among the nonprofits that I work with, to go back to something better.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Is that being articulated in some way, in terms of the committees that you work with? I mean,
I think that's sort of
or
at
is
the
that just
heart of Reimagine Addison County, is
Right.
that
Okay.
our commitment this year has been to respond, recover, reimagine, and rebuild. And so that rebuild piece, we're beginning Reimagine. Certainly the pandemic's still happening. People, I think one thing to remember is that we're feeling vaccinated, we're feeling the sunshine on our faces. People are starting to see their grandbabies again, or maybe plan vacations. But there are still a lot of people in Addison County, our neighbors, who are very much living with some realities of a pandemic that are not done yet. And so there's still a lot of work to do. And we're kind of dipping our toes in the recover, reimagine, and rebuild phases all at the same time.
How does that get out into the public? How do you see yourself? You're working with the committees. They're working with the public, but how do you see a way in which that includes drawing people in who are not in any one of these organizations?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and something that we often think about is how do we make sure everyone in the county is hearing this message, and we have our traditional methods that are so wonderful, like the Addison Independent, for example, who's so kind in covering our news stories, and we have our own social media for folks to follow, and a blog where we highlight stories like these. And But if, we love visiting community groups that maybe are working on something, maybe you're weaving baskets, but,
Right.
we'd warmly welcome an invitation to any community group that would be interested in learning more. And if there are people who have ideas about folks who should be connected to this work, we're all ears.
I think that's a whole profitable row to hoe, as they would say here.
Yeah.
To hoe that row, and in terms of, because people, I don't know this, but in the past, I know working with stories, some people will say, "I don't have a story to tell." I don't. No, I can't. I'm not a storyteller. But in reality, everybody has stories, and sometimes they just need to find some way to encourage them to do it. And often it's with activities that it's concrete, that they could, all the work that's been done with food in the pandemic is just incredible.
It is, yeah.
I mean, and you think about the wide range of people in terms of age. Young kids have, they're being put forward, and they're rightfully so, but creating various kind of food projects and so forth. So it's a good time to stir the pot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be exciting. Well, there's some last things. I always like last shots, as they say. There's some last things that you've thought about that we have maybe kicked out here in this very informal time.
Yeah.
In this new studio.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's really
It's
nice.
really gorgeous.
And you are we are the first two, I think, to do this kind of story.
Oh,
So,
well, what an honor.
that's a story we will tell.
Yeah. That's great.
So,
Well, I just am humbled and thankful to be at United Way and to be in this position where we get to interact with so many different organizations working on so many critical issues, and to have the connection both to those kind of boots on the ground organizations and the incredible donors who live in this area or love it dearly. It's an honor to connect that work, and I'm thankful to be here. I know the rest of the staff at United Way too is thankful, and really would be pleased to talk with folks who are interested in learning more.
well, we will enjoy the conversation.
Great.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you for
very
having
much.
me.
So until we meet again.
Wonderful. Thank you.